Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, and welcome to a chilly episode of the Good Leader Podcast. I say chilly because I just got back from the last frontier. Do you know
From
what? The last frontier.
The last frontier?
The last frontier, yes. I'm a big fan of state nicknames.
Kind of like Oregon Trail.
Oh.
No. I'm a huge fan of state nicknames. So do you know what state's nickname is the last frontier?
Oh, Alaska.
Nailed it. Alaska.
Only because I know where you got back from.
Well, but that's the state nickname. Do you
Is
know what?
it?
Yeah.
Like the Big Apple?
Well, that's New York
the
City.
Hoosier State.
I know, but that's
New York is a city and a state.
yeah. Is it?
I didn't know if you knew. The Big Apple is New York City.
But is it like that?
Like nicknames. Well, like Oklahoma. Do you know Oklahoma's state nickname? Well, let's do it this way. I
don't
should have
know.
put together a game. You know, I love these games. All right, I'm going to write a note right here. This will be a good
Why
game.
is dust
But
bunnies came to my
But which example? Okay, so for example, if I was to give you which state is known as the Sooner State?
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, you nailed it. That's it. That's the state nickname.
Oh.
Most states have like an official nickname. Sooner State, by the way, is Oklahoma's.
Hoosiers.
Let me give you you want an easy one or a hard one, Lim?
Hard one.
What is the Pelican State?
Louisiana.
Whoa, that was great. You nailed that.
I'm thinking Pelicans, NBA.
Oh, good job. But
Wow.
it is. So Louisiana is actually known as others you know, like the Sunshine State
Florida.
is Florida. The Bumblebee State, or the Beehive, not Bumblebee, the Beehive State. This is what I mean by state nicknames.
Ooh, that's harder than
This is the kind of
Pelican.
games. The reason I know these is we played these kind of games when I was a kid, when we go on road trips. Like this is the kind of
Geography
stuff.
games.
Yeah, geography games, trivia, things like this. My mom would quiz us, and we
The
That
Bumblebee.
feels
Just,
right.
it feels
that
right.
feels
It's on
right for
brand.
knowing.
I don't
yeah.
know what the Bumblebee State is.
Beehive. Sorry, I misspoke.
Beehive.
It's Beehive
I want to
State.
say like a Nebraska or
I
Iowa.
was thinking Tennessee.
Orange is closer. It's more west than east. It's a surprise. That's
Not
why this was a
Montana.
hard one.
Colorado.
This is a hard one. Utah. Utah
Wow.
is known
Oh,
as
Utah.
the Beehive
No, I
State.
wouldn't have guessed that.
These are
yeah.
tricky. Some are tricky, some are on brand, but they're really fun actually. And once you know them, it's like cool. Like New York is the Emporia State, I think.
Ooh,
I think
don't
that's
know.
what it's
Oh, I
called,
didn't
the
even know
Emporia
that.
State. I'm pretty sure.
I don't know that.
Yeah, I'll put together a whole quiz next time.
Emporia?
I'm pretty sure. No, not Emporia. Empire State. I'm a dummy. I just misspoke.
Okay.
I thought
Why
that
did I
was a
say
flower.
Emporia? Where did I come up with that? No, the Empire State, New York.
Okay.
That makes way more sense. It's the Empire
yeah,
State.
now I'm tracking with you. I was like, wow, man, that
And
I
just
really
so the
didn't
audience
know that.
knows, so I don't look like I'm not looking at a list or anything. I'm just going off my
dome.
my dome here, remembering.
I mean, I had high trust in
Man,
you because I was
this
like,
is-
Well,
wow.
you didn't. Well, when I was like,
I
that
did not
doesn't
know
sound- You ever
that.
say something and then you're like, that didn't sound right.
All the time.
Like that.
All the time.
no, Lem.
It's like camping. So deep.
Oh my goodness. Well, today it is a chilly episode because I did just get back from Alaska. I was working with the Kenichi tribe. It was phenomenal. It was 3 days. Paradigm Shift, proud sponsor of the show. We do leadership training and development all across the beautiful United States and the globe. And I was sent to Alaska. Now, the reason I'm telling this story is not just to say what I did, although that was fun. I don't know who sold it. Kevin, I'm assuming. He put me to work. You guys really put me to work. The podcast is like what I do for fun.
Yeah.
And then I got to go earn a living. And it was 3 days, 3 full days.
It was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah.
Did you see it beforehand? Did you know before or after I
No.
told you it was a lot?
No, I actually didn't realize. I was
Once
just
again,
thinking,
poor
oh,
Jared.
you're
I'm just
going.
on my own. Yeah, over here. Everybody, here's the way it goes, Lemuel. Everybody else, and just for the podcast, the Good Leader Nation out there, everybody else on the team gets all this support. They get all this, are you doing okay? Can we help? What do you need? Are you mentally healthy? Are you emotionally secure? What does Jared get? No, don't let the door hit you on the way out, Jared.
What all did you have to do?
Glad you asked. Thank you.
Did you have to juggle?
Pretty much.
Basically.
Oh, kind of.
Kind of,
A little
honestly,
bit.
kind of, because it was 3 days and it was a glorious event. It was phenomenal. Working with the entire team there, the staff and tribal council with the Kenichi tribe was phenomenal. But the first day was with their tribal council, 7 individuals, and working through some team building, strategic planning with their tribal council leaders. And that was a full day, like 8:30 to 4. The next day, 8:30 to 4, we worked with their directors. And they had about 20 directors from multiple departments. We worked on leadership development in the morning with them. And then the tribal council met with us that afternoon to work on really communication. Because, oftentimes when you have two different bodies, one like a governing body for an organization and the other like the leadership managerial staff, Man, sometimes communication can be muddled, like expectations
sure.
can be blurred. And we see that a lot. I see that a lot with tribes, especially. I see that with organizations in general. But they wanted to do something about it. And it was a phenomenal day of training. But once again, another full day, 9 to 4. And I was by myself. And I'm not saying woe is me, although
Well,
would have been
he is a
nice.
little bit,
Would have
yeah.
been nice to have a little bit of support from the team. But the final day is where Kevin really put us to work. And by us, I mean just me. Okay, I'm only saying us because I want to be a transformational leader and inclusive. But me, 8:30 to 3, all day, 400 people in a room with me, with
400.
leadership training, workshop
Wow.
development. Yeah, we had 2 stories. There were people up. It was
You had all those hours.
yes, all those hours.
Wow.
Not
That's a
all
lot of
those
hours.
people.
Well, and for those of you, if you're out there and
Those
you're not in
hours.
facilitation, that's like I'm standing up on the stage, speaking, engaging.
like 7
Yeah.
hours.
And so in our style at Paradigm Shift, we don't just do keynotes. It's a workshop. And so
Yeah.
we do a lot of experience-based learning. So it's a lot of activities and, asking questions and prompts and hearing. And so when you're a group of 20 people, that makes a lot of sense because everybody can hear everybody and we're sharing information and knowledge. Well,
Yeah.
400, it has to be a totally different strategy. I mean, to get the same results, you have to go about it a completely different way. And I will say it takes a certain level of an experienced facilitator to handle
Yeah.
that number and that length of time and not be boring, and not lose everybody. And anyway, so
I wouldn't wanna do it.
it was a full event. That's not even why I'm telling it. Although, thank you for listening. I appreciate it. I obviously needed it to get
Someone
it off my
call
chest.
you a servant leader.
Thank you. Wow. Today, we are going to talk about servant leadership, Anj. I appreciate that. Thank you for bringing me back to point. Today, we are talking about servant leadership. What the heck is servant leadership? We're on this quest here at the Good Leader Podcast to figure out what is servant leadership. I don't know if this is servant leadership or not, but I risked my life for the
Literal-
team.
Literal?
Yeah.
Okay, so this Alaska trip, I had to fly. I flew,
Arguably,
I flew
yeah.
all day. Arguably, but I flew all day to get to Anchorage. I got to Anchorage at 9 p.m., got off the plane, had to get my bags, go out of the airport, and then go back into the airport to go to another airline, like a small local airline, for a 30-minute flight from Anchorage to Kenai. And so it's like a little puddle jumper, I got on this this plane, and Kyle, the intern Price, named it. I sent the picture to the team, and he said, "Look, that's like the church van of airplanes."
Yeah.
And it really was. But before I even got
really
there,
was.
It was hilarious. I didn't even have to really check in. I walked in. I said, "Hi, my name's Jared. Here's my ID." He barely looked at my ID. You don't have to go through security because it's just a local airline. Yeah, I didn't have to go through security. I didn't have to do anything. I just got on the airplane. But it's a snowstorm. So when I walk out there, it is snow everywhere. Now, I'm from Oklahoma, so I'll admit, I'm trying to be fair. I wouldn't call it a blizzard, and what I would call a snowstorm, somebody else might call, a little dusting. Exactly. But in my defense, here is a fact. When I got on that plane that only seated 8 people, I looked out every window and could only see white.
Yeah.
Like, so I could only see white. It's snowing that much. And it's 10 o'clock at night. The pilot gets on.
And this plane only holds 8 people.
It
Like, I
only
don't think we're
holds
talking
8
about how
people.
small I
Oh,
saw
it's
the
a
picture
tiny-
of it.
It was a
so
tiny plane.
We'll have to
Yes.
put the picture on the pod or something. But it's like small.
Yes, it was a small
Yeah.
plane at night in the
It's
snow.
not like a commercial jet.
And I don't do this all the time. So at this point, I'll admit, I'm a pretty avid risk taker when it comes to travel. I've done a lot, and I'm generally not apprehensive. I was starting to feel nervous. I was like, okay, I'm legitimately nervous. The pilot gets on. He says, "Hey, everybody." It was just me and one other gentleman on the plane.
Everybody.
And he says, "Hey, everybody." And I said, "Hi, I'm Jared. What's your name?" I mean, I'm talking to him. He's from me to you. I mean, he's 8 feet in front of me. "Hey, I'm Jared. What's your name?" And he says, "Oh, I'm Ben." I said, "Hey, Ben, what do you think about all this snow?" And he said, "Oh, hey, don't worry. Snow doesn't bother us at all. Piloting in the snow, flying in the snow, no big deal." He was like, "High winds might, give us some trouble. This is nothing." He's like, "This snow doesn't bother me at all. Don't worry about it." And I said, "You know what, Ben?" This is literally what I said. "You know what, Ben? I appreciate a confident pilot. Thank you very much. I don't know if you're lying to me, but I like your confidence." But then we start taking off. Like, so we're taxiing, and then we start building up speed, and I can feel us like slipping. You know how when you're driving a car and you can kind of, our traction's not great. That's what I'm feeling. And I was praying hard. I started
Wow.
I was white knuckling the arms, and I was like, wow, okay, sweet Jesus, please let me make it through this. It was
Yeah.
pretty scary.
Wow.
It was scary. But you know what, Anj? I'd do it again for the team.
I know.
would.
You might be.
I would do it again.
You might have to.
I would do it again. I hope so. I hope I get to go back and work with all my new friends. It was great. Oh, I had such a good time.
Yeah.
Met some incredible people. I got another great story about fighting insecurity as a leader. Because in the moment, there was a wonderful young lady who made me feel very insecure about myself and my presentation on that 400 day. I'll save that for another pod.
We'll have to come back to that.
It made me question myself. Yeah. I know, and you think I'm a confident guy. For the most part, I am. But we all deal with our insecurities.
Yep.
We're all humans here. Speaking of dealing with insecurities, did you know that today on the podcast we are going to hear from Andrea Heyer? She's done some deep dive research on servant leadership because we keep hitting this topic, and I don't know that we're going to get to an answer, but we challenged the team here on the Good Leader podcast to think of the stories, their personal anecdotes of servant leadership. And what we kept coming up with was these nebulous answers. Like we kept coming well, we're not really sure. And it's kind of this and it's kind of that. And the idea, it's kind of one of these weird things when you say, I want to be a better servant leader. It is almost like saying I'm just going to be more humble, or humility is my greatest strength. Well, okay. It's this weird, oxymoronical idea but we are not giving up. We're going to continue to try to figure it out and how we can grow in servant leadership when we get back from the break.
Well, if you want to be like the friends we just heard about earlier in the pod and get Jared on the next plane over to our next event, check us out at ps.company. If you're looking for Jared Murr himself, check him out at jaredmurr.com.
Thank you, Anj. I appreciate that.
That was the quickest commercial of all time.
That was quick, but hey, you know what?
It's short, sweet, to the point.
The key to effective communication is brevity. Anj.
There you go, Jess.
Tell me what you got about servant leadership. You looked up some really good stuff, and I like it. Once again, you had some quick thoughts on servant leadership in the pre-meeting, the production meeting that I really liked. What were you saying, like the question they ask you in an interview or something?
Oh, yeah. Let me correct something first. It's jaredmurr.co.
I know. You know what? I looked at you, and I was like, ooh.
Yeah.
It might be .co.
Jaredmurr.co.
I don't even know.
Jess is going to be so happy. You just made Jess's day right there. That's good servant leadership.
Because it was too good.
That's good servant leadership. It was.
Great.
You nailed
it was for you, Jess.
Yeah,
well,
she's going to be happy.
I couldn't be too good.
She's going to be happy.
Couldn't be too short.
Sorry, what was your question?
You, in the pre-production meeting, you were talking about this idea of servant leadership, and you brought up a question that someone asked you in an interview one time.
Okay, so I went to an interview. I flew out. It was out of state. They brought me in for the weekend. And
that's a big interview.
Yeah, it was like a group interview. They brought in a bunch of other people too for different roles, and I'd never experienced this. They did what do you call it when you date someone for like 60 seconds?
Speed dating.
Speed dating. So it was a speed dating style interview, and I was answering all these questions. I was crushing it, and then I got to this one table, and
crushing it.
The guy asked me. He said, "What makes you a leader worth following?" And he didn't clarify. He just left it hanging. I couldn't answer it. I wanted to answer because I'm a servant, or because I'm a servant leader, or something like it, because I'm so humble. And I just sat there for like 3 minutes, didn't know how to answer the question, because I was in that tension of, I don't want to sound like I'm trying to make myself seem awesome, and I'm not. But it was this weird tension.
And I liked that story because to me that frames this conundrum of servant leadership, where it's not entirely objective here. Like, and if I want to say I want to lose 20 pounds, and what are some ideas for me to follow? Oh, I can do this or do this. I want to be a better servant leader. It's like, oh well, you just need to
pick up trash.
It's like, well, okay, so I'm picking up trash. I'll pick up the trash if I walk by, but if a piece of trash is picking up in the parking lot and no one is there to see me, did I really serve?
I cannot get behind the line, and you probably are not going to agree with me on this, but
I love disagreeing with you.
I actually hate the line, like, I'm never going to ask anybody to do something that I wouldn't do myself. Yeah. I hate that line.
Ooh, now that could be a totally different pod, but I am
absolutely going to ask Jess to design our website, and I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm bad at it.
Right.
What? It's such a cliche. I just feel like people say it and don't actually think about what they're saying. Like, I am going to ask half of our staff to do something that I'm not going to do. Because why else is their job important?
Well, okay.
I can't do it.
This is great about the quest for servant leadership that we're on. I think I've heard, and I could misquote it. I'm pretty sure it's John Maxwell that tells the story. Could be another. It's a leadership guy like John Maxwell. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's honestly one of my favorite John Maxwell stories is when he talks about all the quotes he has. He was like, I don't make most of them up. What you do is if you want to quote, just quote somebody else. And then after you do it long enough, you go from telling their name, then you say, well, somebody once said.
Yeah, this is
And then you go,
so
and then
true.
after you do that for a while, you say, you know what? I've heard it said.
Yeah.
And then after you do that for a while, you're like, it's like I always say. So his story is probably somebody else's story anyway. But he tells this story of the president of an organization one day that had hired a new VP over some area, and he's walking through the office, and the VP is vacuuming the hallway. And he stops and was like, hey, why are you vacuuming the hallway? He's like, well, I just noticed that this needed vacuum, and he fired him.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I'm not paying you
Yep.
to vacuum.
Yep.
That's not the kind of leadership I need. I need you to help other people do their jobs. So it's kind of along your point that, and I don't know, but that
Can't say I would have fired him, but
that goes against some of my grain or my ingrained ideology of like, wait a minute, no, aren't you supposed to pick up the trash? Aren't you supposed to vacuum? But it's like, well, if I spend all my time vacuuming, am I doing my job?
No,
So all of this is kind of the conundrum that we're dealing
The
with.
bigger thing is you just took someone else's job.
Well, yes.
That's where I thought the story was
That's
going to
good.
go, because I had actually never heard it. But I'm like, no, I am meddling. I'm taking
Well, that
your
was
job
his point.
now.
It wasn't like, yes, it's like I'm paying someone
Yeah.
to vacuum. I'm
Yeah.
not paying your salary to vacuum.
Right.
So I don't need you vacuuming
Right.
unless you want to be the janitor.
Yeah.
So kind of the same thing said a
Oh,
different way. I
it's
like
tough.
the way you said it there. You're taking someone else's job.
Yeah.
And yeah, to your point, I agree with you. No, I don't disagree with that. It's kind of I hold both things, and this is where the challenge. This is why we're having the podcast. I do believe that if I walk by the piece of trash, I should pick up the piece of trash.
Yeah.
But
Totally.
I also believe that I am going to ask you to do things that I'm not willing to do. Especially now. Like actually some of those things that I'm asking you to do now, I did do 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's not the position I'm in now. And that's not me trying to be egotistical. It's not my job now though. And so I'm taking your job, and I think probably being a poor leader, anyway, so
Yeah, I just think that has always been. I hear it, I cringe every time I hear someone say
so then
that.
what's
I'm
servant
like,
leadership? What do we do with this?
servant?
Lemuel, go ahead.
Lem?
Well, sorry. I know you got some content.
No, let us be a servant leader.
Yeah.
Hear you out.
It's all about
It
you.
seems like there's two lanes. It's like, what are we serving? Are we serving the mission, or are we serving the person? If we're serving the person, to me, that would, it would, like Jesus, washing feet, picking up chairs, serving the individual versus serving the mission seems like it would be more outcome based.
Ooh.
Just, I know that's whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, what are we? 21 minutes in the pod. You brought up the Jesus juke. I gotta admit, I lost the bet. I thought it was gonna be sooner than that. Anytime we talk about servant leadership, when is Lemmy going to bring up Jesus?
Yeah.
Over 20 minutes. I did not have that.
He's the
That's a
icon.
big payoff, actually. Anybody had the over? It's a great question. It's a great thought.
And the outcome. That's a great. Yeah. That's a
Well,
good
I like
point.
what you just phrased there, like actions versus outcome. I don't know if that's
Yeah.
how you phrase it, but something like because Jesus, if we are going to use him as an example, which hey, why not? He held both, right? You know what I'm saying? He did wash people's feet, but he also, came to seek and save. So I don't know where we land on this. What do you got, Anj? You found some good stuff that was kind of a different take than any of us had heard.
Yeah, because the way that I've always heard servant leadership, and again, it could be just the ministry circles I had more so been in, but it's those things. It's like I'm going to crank it out and do all this extra work, and I'm almost like having something to prove is how I've seen this version of servant leadership that I've always just hated. Like I'm going to stay here the latest. I'm going to stay here the
Oh.
longest. That drives me nuts. I hate that.
Well, that's almost like self-righteousness.
It
That's
is,
the
but you're
opposite of
doing
servant
it out
leadership.
of
Serving with an agenda.
yes, serving with an agenda, but we call it servant leadership. Oh man, that you will get me on a soapbox. You already are getting me on. I'm stepping up. to it.
I'll even take it a step nicer than that.
Yeah, you can be.
Let me be
I'm not
nicer
gonna
about
be,
it. Well,
I'm not
serving
gonna
with
be
an
nice.
agenda, I'll even be nicer. I do think I've seen people who become martyrs.
Yes.
And no one's asking you to do that.
No.
So it's not like serving with an agenda, like look at me, but it is like, no, I have to do this. It's like, actually, you don't. You don't have to be a martyr. You don't have to work those hours. You don't have to do that. And that's not servant leadership. So I agree. Well, we shared on the last episode, take your vacation. And those statistics, like take your vacation, take your time off, take care of yourself, all that. We've repeated that a lot, and we've had a lot of episodes on burnout.
Yep. I would rather our team work, give 100. We can't always give 100% all the time, but as much as they
Speak for
can,
yourself.
give 100% from the hours of 9 to 4.
Yes.
And actually leave on
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
Then dilly dally.
Couldn't agree more with that.
Build relationships,
Yes.
do whatever they're doing, and then
Yeah, all that
stay here till
crap.
6.
Yeah.
All that crap that we preach, But I'm like, work hard when you need to work hard so that you don't.
Yeah.
Later, you're not proving anything to me by staying. All you're proving to me is number one, I might need to look at getting another person. Truly, if you
Yeah.
really are working all those hours and we still are not getting the work done, okay, let's look at how to divide out that authority. Or you're not delegating, or you're just not doing your job from 9 to 5. I
Right.
mean, what else? I know there's nuances. I'm making this way too simple. I hear that. I know. If you're in like a sales role, people call you all the time. I get it. I hear it. You know, I work late too. But I think I just hate when people wear it as a badge of honor. I do not hate when people work
That's
late.
the point. It's
I
not
can
the working
respect
late,
it.
and it's not the getting something done. It's,
Yeah.
and especially as we keep framing this with servant leadership, it's wearing it as a badge of honor or claiming that is your. And that's really where as we get ready to hear this list. Is it a list that you've got?
Well, I have a definition that I think is pretty
Ooh,
good that
cool.
encompasses all of this, and then 4 of the elements that make maybe the idea of servant leadership that we're working towards.
Well, because to your point, I posed to the team here, how do we know I am exemplifying servant leadership?
Right.
If it is hard to be objective with, how do I know
Yep.
I am exemplifying servant leadership? What are the
Yep.
outcomes or what are the qualities of the environment or the qualities of my leadership? Because we talked about those 4 I's of transformational leadership on the last episode and really liked it. And then began to think, well, what's the difference in that and servant leadership? How do I know that? What would be the 4 I's of servant leadership? Or are there? Or does it even exist? And those sorts of things.
Yep.
And it just kept coming back nebulous. But then you found, let's hear the definition you found.
Well, definition is servant leadership is a leadership style that prioritizes growth, well-being, and empowerment of employees. It aims to foster an inclusive environment that enables everyone in the organization to thrive as their authentic self. Try to really emphasize some keywords in that. Put an asterisk on it, but growth, well-being, empowerment, inclusive environment. I think those are all just really huge. And sometimes, we do have to work after 5 or 6 to make those things happen. So I don't want that to be the biggest takeaway of all of this. I just think how we model that matters a lot.
Okay.
So there are 4 components within that definition. Do you want to hear those?
Love to.
Right
now?
Share. Sure.
Okay. So 4 components of the kind of trickle down from that definition is number 1, flexibility. Number 2 is empathy. And number 3 is stewardship. And number 4 is listening. Flexibility, empathy, stewardship, and listening are 4 elements of servant leadership, at least as defined by this research.
Okay, what are your thoughts on those? You like them? You found it?
I actually think I do. I think I do. Because it's not, I don't think it's a one-stop shop, like even as simple as we want to make it. But if I'm really thinking of who I would call a servant leader, either in my life currently or has been before, I mean, I think if they don't exemplify these, they've learned to exemplify them. And I really like that empathy is in the list. I think that sticks out to me a lot. And stewardship surprised me a little bit.
It's funny. Empathy is my least favorite of those, just because I think that it's a really abused word.
It is,
honestly.
yes.
So that.
Well, I think that's why I liked it in this context.
But that's not the words. That's not the word's fault. You know what I mean? Like, that's not the quality's fault. That's the way people.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just
Gotta have empathy.
Yeah, and
it is. It's true. I
mean,
actually normally don't like the word.
well, I don't like it because I think people are starting to, not all the time, but people are starting to use that as I need you to excuse my behavior.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you have any empathy? Well, hold on. Okay, I can be empathetic, and I want to be empathetic. I do like it as a virtue, but
Doesn't mean agreement.
yeah, or it doesn't mean a green light for you to just not do your job, or for you to abuse others.
Or
You know,
just
or
because
to-
I hold you account. It's like you can't hold someone accountable and be empathetic at the same time.
Now a great podcast title. Let's put this in the show notes. Accountability is not the opposite of empathy.
It's not. No.
No.
And man, that
Well, that's it. What was the? And I don't know how you phrased it, but when we were talking about servant leadership on one episode off the cuff, you were really talking about how servant leaders keep people accountable.
Yeah.
I don't want to put words in your mouth,
Oh,
but I
yeah.
remember you sharing that story
Yeah.
how it was like challenging. You needed to be challenged, and that I think it was a professor maybe at the time, someone in your life was challenging you in a healthy way and serving you, but it wasn't just this like pandering. It wasn't. But most people would not describe that as empathy. That's what I think. Most people think accountability and empathy are almost opposites, or in opposition to each other.
Yeah.
It's like actually, I don't think it is. So
No.
I like that it's on the list, but like I said, I actually love flexibility on there. That was the one that
I
kind
did.
of threw me off. I was like, wow, that's actually a pretty good word that I don't often ascribe to servant leadership. So it's fascinating. That was
But
the
it's
first
got a
one on
lot
the
of
list.
truth.
I
After I
agree.
heard it, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's because
I agree.
if we're serving the mission, as you were talking about, Lem, and I'm thinking about our team, there's been a lot of times where we're coming up on a deadline. And if it's not detrimental, we've had there's a death in the family, somebody gets sick. Basically, the deadline, I am either going to demand them to push past it or I'm going to flex and move the deadline. And sometimes you can't. You just can't. I mean, the event's happening tomorrow, whether you are sick or someone died or a different scenario. But there's other times where I've worked for leaders where it wasn't an option. Even if they could have flexed the deadline, it's not changing. It's not moving. This is what it is. Stay up till midnight and get it done. And the more I think about it, I'm like, I actually think I can totally see where flexibility plays a huge part in the servant leadership dynamic of all of that, because I kind of do have to meet you halfway to serve where you're at right now appropriately.
Yeah.
Because if you're just not doing the work, that's not appropriate. But if we're holding accountability with all of it and flexibility.
Well, but that's where I like accountability is with stewardship.
Yep.
So to me, stewardship is to me a good partnering element with empathy.
Yep.
So I really do like this list.
Yep.
When you were saying flexibility,
it builds on each other.
It does build on each other. And what I was thinking with flexibility is I like it. Then I think how many things are non-negotiable in stone? And you know what I'm saying? For us, not many. And I think if you have a servant leadership mindset, not many things. I'm trying to be honest with myself. Not that I'm the world's greatest servant leader, but as someone who's striving, just like those listeners out there, we're striving to be servant leaders. I have very few things that are in stone. You know what I'm saying? It's like like even when you were saying deadline, I started to say the statement like, well, there's no deadline that is immovable. And it's like, well, actually, and then you said like, no, the event's happening. But I was like, well, yeah, but so then I was like, well, it's not in stone. If someone has a problem, we can get someone else on that event. Or, you know, there's very few things in stone. Like, hey, you have to do this in this way at this time. Very few. There are always, and the reason for that is because we want to serve people individually. You know, and so I think we're looking for these traits or these ways to measure our servant leadership. And I think I'm not sold on it. But I like flexibility, and then it's like, well, how many things do you have in stone? And then a side note of that, this is kind of a weird story, but I think I'm curious how it lands with you. I worked with someone both of you, and the audience.
We did both look at you at the same time.
We did, but I'm curious how it lands with y'all. And maybe I'm going to share something, and it could just show my personal pet peeve and pettiness, and that could be true too. I used to work with someone, and they had a real issue. They had a real issue with people chewing ice. And
chewing ice?
Chewing ice. Like if I'm sitting here, like you and I are sitting here at lunch and having a snack, and I'm chewing. Yeah, that was good. That was good. Just like that. What was that sound, Lim? Right. I'm chewing ice. Now, I think there are different levels of chewing ice. Sometimes you can chew ice pretty quietly or pretty loudly. I think
he did the opposite,
but we get the point. Yeah. He did the opposite.
Loud
but we get
was
the point.
first.
Yeah,
quiet
loud was first, quiet was second. But he was very demanding in that he let it be known that I don't like that. And so much so that in the workplace that we're working together, and it was like, I was like, okay, that like you are, like I said, these rules in stone. This inflexibility. Like, seriously, that's a rule?
He didn't like the audio of hearing it, or just, oh, that person's chewing ice. I don't, whether I hear it or not.
I don't know if it was the audio or whatever. I think whatever. It just, hey, could you stop chewing ice? Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just trying to think. And I mean, I'm sure we all have things that annoy us or whatever. But I'm like, that is, and I know this is a silly, stupid example. But I'm kind of trying to think of a silly, stupid example to show what I mean by a lack of flexibility. Like, wow, you're making that a rule for you? Like, you're letting it be known? Like, hey, I don't like that around here. Like, okay, are you here to serve me, or are you here to... is that a servant leadership attitude, or is that, you're inflexible here? That's a weird rule. That is a weird rule.
I think
it is a rule. It's like, that's what I'm saying. Like, how many rules do we have? How many non-negotiables do we have?
I sometimes feel that way about PTO. I can't speak about that for us because we have pretty much, we do have a cap on it, but it's a pretty extended period of time. And I also think there's industries where you can't, maybe be a doctor and literally take off 6 months at a time. I don't know that you're taking stuff off 6 months at a time at any job unless something happens.
Who's taking off 6 months at a time? I want on that. I'm going to Alaska.
We don't even have that
3 days.
As a mark, but I just, I think about that a lot for my friends who are in more traditional work environments is like, man, it's kind of crazy because I think even just that little ounce of flexibility or a 1-day hybrid or 1-day remote, whatever it is, I even just think about little tangibles that are kind of in and throughout, like sprinkled in and throughout organizations that, I don't know, some people can consider big and some people consider small, but to me, it's just like, I would think that there's some flex on that.
Yeah. Well, once again,
I would think.
I really do like this list. And so for the purposes of today, we're going to have another episode on this at some point. You know, we're in this ongoing search for what is servant leadership. And I like, who came up with that list? Do you have some credit there? Do we need to credit somebody? Is that from a book? Is that just an article or something? Because I really liked it. I like that definition about growth and well-being and empowerment of employees, looking to be inclusive and helping everyone thrive as their authentic self. And then On shared those 4 traits of servant leadership: flexibility, empathy, stewardship, listening. We really only started to unpack flexibility. I'd love to talk about empathy versus accountability at some point, because I do think those are often either consciously or subconsciously stated in opposition.
Yeah.
But that was a good list.
Yeah,
Good
it
list,
was.
Anj. Who came
It
up with
was.
it? Do you know who came up with it?
It just seems to be an article in a magazine.
Oh, okay.
But the article was written by Daniel M. Hurt.
Okay.
So
Thank you, Daniel.
fairly recent, within the last year.
Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate that article. Lemuel, you got everything you need now so that you can answer the question, why are you a leader worth following? Feel pretty good?
I've
You can
still
say?
been struggling with that one.
Okay. Well, maybe on the next episode, we'll help Lim answer that question.
Maybe we should.
And he'll keep working on his sound effects. Between then and now, go out there and be a good leader.